Hello. Today I will introduce you to the basic motivations of the actions of a huge part of humanity, men and women, past, in the present, and the foreseeable future. As humans, we like to think of ourselves as rational and informed, and that all decisions and actions we take are the result of in-depth analysis and are the best possible. Perhaps this is sometimes the case. However, from my observations, there are other conclusions at a basic level. Every human action you can imagine boils down to the two basic issues of fear and pleasure. These are primal and very strong instincts. There is nothing wrong with that. Of course, on the other hand, as you will soon see, people who know these mechanisms and their effect on the average person can easily manipulate even entire nations, not to mention individuals. Fear, or more precisely the avoidance of suffering, and greed or the desire for pleasure are primal motivations, so deeply hidden in our brains that in the vast majority of cases they are subconscious, that is, ones we are not even aware of. Let's look at the first and, in my opinion, the strongest possible motivation: fear. We fear the unknown because if it is unknown, the intentions and consequences of such novelty are also unknown. It does not matter whether it is a person or a situation that can threaten us to the highest degree on the level of health and life. Fear, an unpleasant feeling, is directly connected to our nervous system, more specifically to its oldest part, the reptilian brain. This is evolutionarily the oldest part of the brain, which is responsible for the basic and automatic functions of life, such as breathing, heart rate, survival, and procreation. It operates outside of consciousness and repeats the patterns programmed into it. From a conscious point of view, the worst part is that this part of the brain is informed of all stimuli first and therefore controls the other parts. An example of the powerful influence and limited ability to consciously control the reptile brain is the heartbeat or breathing. Try to stop your pulse for 5 minutes and then return to normal heart rate. It can't be done, likewise with breathing. Try consciously holding your breath for 5 minutes. It won't work. The reptile brain, whose job it is to keep our bodies alive, will force us to take a breath much earlier because the oxygen in the air we breathe is essential for life. Consequently, the fear of death for most people is the main and strongest driver of action. I encourage you to delve deeper into yourself because the only relationship you can be sure will last for the rest of your life is with yourself. So it would be good to get to know such a perfect companion as best you can. Now, as a workout, let's consider why people are so afraid of getting fired from their jobs, for example. Because losing your job means losing your income, your revenue, that is your livelihood. This can result in the fact that if you do not have money set aside in the form of savings, you can have problems with a roof over your head and with food, and this in inadequate conditions is already directly life-threatening. The loss of a job can, as a consequence of the following events, lead to death from starvation or hypothermia in winter. This is why the very thought of running out of money is so unpleasant. Such an unpleasant feeling is intended to protect us from the worst. Another example is the fear of public speaking, especially during first appearances in front of a larger group of people. A person may feel uncomfortable, have soft legs, and experience fear or severe anxiety. He may have an accelerated heartbeat and feel agitation or fear, all characteristic symptoms for a run or fight reaction. Public speaking can, in our eyes, lead to embarrassment, which, at least in our minds, will lead to social ostracism, that is, being thrown outside one social group in the old days, when society was not as developed as it is today. This could even mean death, so the punishment was painful. However, today in a European country, death from starvation is unlikely, but the fear has remained and can be very strong. Another example of fear inadequate to the real threat is all kinds of phobias. I realize that this is treated as a disorder and may be subject to treatment, but I point out that even though logically a person knows that the risk is small, the fear can be paralyzing, and consciously one cannot control it. Avoidance of suffering or unpleasantness is also a driver of interpersonal relationships. Think for a moment. If you have no interest that would make you tolerate an inconvenience for the sake of gaining a benefit, would you meet with friends you don't like, in whose company you don't feel comfortable? Rather not. You choose your friends so that the time spent with them is pleasant, a pleasant conversation, a good party. You avoid suffering and pursue pleasure. Fear causes us to avoid or engage in certain behaviors, but the main motive for acting, often unconsciously, is to reduce the unpleasant sensation that our brain generates in various situations. The stronger the fear, the stronger the reaction. Now let's take the example of children's fairy tales. Why do they feature characters that are often scary, who are in places where young children themselves should not go? Is it by chance to discourage or even deter the youngest from certain activities? Notice also how parents sometimes speak to a child who does not obey or does not want to follow some command. Many times they use fear. It looks more or less like this. A daughter doesn't want to go home with her mother and shouts that she wants to stay on the playground. Mom communicates to her that if she doesn't go home with her immediately, she won't be able to eat ice cream, watch cartoons, or go out on her bike, for example. That is, the mother used the tool of fear because she threatened not to allow an activity that the child enjoys very much. That is, she caused fear of losing pleasure. Some might say this is cruel, but unfortunately, it is effective. Fear as an instrument to induce a certain behavior is used in many forms, such as in marketing and sales. The principle of limited time. If during a presentation you like the goods and they represent value to you, but not enough to make a purchase right away because you need to think about it, the salesperson may say that the offer is valid only until today, and this may be true. However, it can also be a technique used consciously and calculated to scare you, or rather to create anxiety that the value you saw during the presentation tomorrow will no longer be available or will be much more expensive. Then the fear is to gently direct you to make a purchase. Fear, because of its power, can be and often is used to control and subjugate people. All you have to do is present a vision of events that a person or people are afraid of and point out what needs to be done to avoid the threat, and biology will do the rest. You may associate facts at this point and think that this is blackmail, and of course, you are right. You already know one of the basic ways of manipulation, which I'm sure you have experienced many times in your life. Listen to the so-called news programs in terms of whether you are being given information that is simple in the form of announcing sentences, or perhaps sentences that are emotionally charged and may cause fear or anxiety at first. You don't even have a chance to evaluate the information that comes to you on your own, because already at the stage of reception, the biological reaction of the body, a vile technique, is aroused in you. Therefore, you must know about it. Watch the commercials, looking for sentences that may imply that you lack something, and this lack is so important that you are threatened by an attractive actress or actor who will not say it directly. Instead, she will use suggestions by association. After all, she can't openly say buy my product or die. That would be too obvious and you would feel that you are being coerced. But I guarantee you that you will find the mechanism of fear and greed in almost every advertisement. Do you think this is a random choice of words? Think again? Pleasure, on the other hand, is a desirable state from which we do not run away, but on the contrary, want more and more of it. Instinctively and subconsciously, people move toward pleasure. Of course, for individuals, what is pleasurable is different. But the rule of thumb is that a person will steer towards pleasant sensations. For example, recall and think about your favorite food. Why exactly is this one your favorite? The banal answer is because it tastes good to me. But what exactly does it mean that it tastes good? It brings you the greatest joy, and thus in this case the greatest benefit. One more example. If there were 10 different dishes on the table in front of you, how would you choose which one to eat first? On what basis would you decide which is the best? Mostly based on which one will bring the most pleasure from eating. Would people have sex if it wasn't pleasurable? It is using pleasure that nature encourages people to have sex because this is how the species is extended. If the body was accompanied by terrible pain comparable to breaking a bone, people would avoid it like fire. This is why women, if they are interested in a man, will emanate their sexuality, tempting him with visions of sex, because they know very well that it is very pleasurable. In addition, such a stimulus goes directly to the reptile brain, that is, it acts on a subconscious level to stimulate the pleasure that everyone desires. This is why, when you see an attractive woman, you will subconsciously be compelled to take a better look at her. Your reptilian brain, which controls such aspects, will want to make sure that the woman you see is attractive. At this point, I'm deliberately leaving out the biochemical processes that our body funds us in the form of various hormones, but they too have their importance in the whole process. It would be good for you to be aware of this because in the future it will allow you to understand the mechanisms of creating bonds between men and women. Why do people drink alcohol or have various addictions? Because at some level of their consciousness, their addiction gives them pleasure, so they lose themselves in this pleasant feeling they get. This means that very often the reality they have found causes them pain. Sometimes physical, sometimes emotional. Pain is unpleasant, so they will avoid it in the way they know is available at the least cost. Repeating this behavior for a long time turns into a habit. Habit becomes second nature to man, despite the positive intention of avoiding suffering. People fall into alcoholism or other harmful addictions. Similarly, excessive eating, including sweets. Sugar improves mood, so if someone is in a low mood, they may reach for sweets such as ice cream or chocolate because they want to feel better. We react positively to the feeling of satiety. It is a reward for us. For hunger, the opposite is true. If any of you have been on a so-called reduction in strength training, i.e. had a caloric deficit in your diet, think back to the first days or weeks. Was it nice? Or was there a strange feeling of irritability? This is how nature forces us to act. If you ended up in this channel as a result of looking for answers and explanations after you were unfairly hurt by the chosen one of your heart, even though you did everything you were told you should do as a man, buy flowers, fulfill every whim, and so on, and the effect was exactly the opposite of what was announced, then your real motivation was to avoid suffering and improve your mood. Contrary to popular opinion, men can be very emotional and experience such situations a lot, especially if you are at the beginning of your journey with women. You don't have a comparison, and you only get information about how to act from movies. You must have felt that you were cheated on yourself. In addition, no one teaches men to recognize, let alone deal with emotions, which are a powerful tool. The classic example where this mechanism is used against you is precisely sex. A woman can punish its absence by counting on your compliance. That is, you will get some if you behave in the way the woman wants. And since sex is pleasurable and you already know that everyone is looking for so-called happiness, it is very likely that you will behave in the way the manipulator expects. It's the old carrot and stick principle. The carrot is pleasurable sex, the stick is absent. I will expand on the topic of manipulation in future episodes. Right now I'm just showing you one example I've probably come across as a good, kind, supportive, and compassionate man. And now the biggest secret that is kept from you. Until you learn and understand that happiness and suffering depend solely on you. Now I'm not talking about pain and pleasure because these factors can be associated in very different, often bizarre ways. Take, for example, masochism or anorexia. As long as you follow your instinct, looking for happiness outside yourself, and nothing outside you can give it to you, you can lose your job. Things you own you can lose, they can be stolen or destroyed. The woman you think gives you happiness may no longer want to be with you. She has that right, and what will you do? She may fail your trust in a very brutal way for you. She will betray you, even though she has pledged fidelity and love. And what will you do? Remember and try to understand, and preferably experience. Everything that is outside of you can be taken away from you and used to control you. Is it easy? Not. It can be long and arduous to learn. It can take years, but it is worth it. Almost every behavior will be characterized by these motivations because they are biological and primal. When you think about it, you'll see them in 99% of people, acquaintances and strangers, friends and enemies, even among loved ones. That's why you need to know, because if you don't, you will be exploited and you will suffer. Because the image of the world that has been sold very often is false. And just because you didn't know about it won't make you not suffer the consequences. You will bear them. Sometimes they will be very painful. You can't cheat life. But you can learn the rules of the game to increase your chances.